mindset. You must believe without a shadow of a doubt that you are a CISO. You must show up like a CISO, think like a CISO, act like a CISO, even if you currently don't have the title. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. I hope you know what time it is. I hope you know the voice. Boom, boom, boom. It's time, it's time, it's time. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. I hope you are doing awesome. I hope you are crushing it this year. But if not, remember, there's still plenty of time. Always time to reset, always time to focus, always time to make progress towards your goals or targets. What I want to talk about today is this idea or process or method or steps that you need to take to get hired as a CISO. It often comes to me in different areas. Some people go, Eric, how do I ace the interview? How do I do follow-up? What should I put on my CV? What are the key things that need to be in place in order to get hired as a CISO? To me, getting hired as a CISO really comes down to four important steps, and the steps must be done in order. Because if you don't do them correctly, if you're missing one step, it's going to throw off all the others. First, mindset. You must believe without a shadow of a doubt that you are a CISO. You must show up like a CISO, think like a CISO, act like a CISO, even if you currently don't have the title. Because here's the reality I get from people. When I do coaching or interview or I'm on panels and people always go, but Eric, if I'm not a CISO, how can I act or behave like one? And I'm like, you got it backwards. I'm like, aren't you a CISO? And they sort of look at me a little weird. They're like, no. I'm like, well, wait, let's differentiate who you are, how you show up, and your title. I think where you're getting confused is you don't have the title of a CISO, and therefore that's what you're associating with your identity. But let me ask you a question. Is this how it really works? Are you walking around, you're not a CISO, you're not a CISO, you're not a CISO, and then a company gives you an offer for a CISO and you accept it, and at that moment, that magic moment, the heavens open up, a bright light comes down, you hear angelic harps playing in the background, and boom, in an instance, you're now a CISO. No! You always had the skill set, you always had the mindset, you always knew what to do, you just didn't have the title. However, you were still acting and behaving like a CISO. You didn't magically one day have no CISO skills, and as soon as you get the title or the offer, it magically instills in you. No, no, no. Just because you don't have the title doesn't mean you don't show up and act on who you are and or who you want to be. So that's the first important step, is most people are not acting or behaving like a CISO. So if you don't think you're a CISO, because you don't have the title, you don't think you're a CISO, you're not acting like a CISO, let me ask you a question. How good is that CV going to be? If that CV is written by somebody who does not believe in themselves, who does not believe they're a CISO, is it really going to scream, I'm a CISO? No. That's problem one. Problem two is if you show up to an interview and you don't think you're a CISO and you're not acting like a CISO, how well is that interview going to go? Not so good. And then you're not even going to get any follow-up, so we don't have to worry about the fourth step. Because the four steps we're going to talk about today is mindset, CV, interview, and post-interview follow-up. Those are really your four steps that are needed to get hired as a CISO that we need to ace. But like I said, everybody skips step one. They go to step 2 and 3, and the problem is if you are not fully convinced and acting like a CISO, because CISOs think differently and act differently and behave differently, your CV is not going to get you the interviews. And then if you do, by happen chance, get an interview, you're not going to do very well because you're not thinking or acting like a CISO. So this first step is so critical. You have to think and act on who you want to be before you have the title to show it. Your actions come first, the title comes second. Oh, but Eric, our company currently has a CISO where I'm at today. I'm looking elsewhere. Great. Mirror them. Act like them. Why can't you go in, even though you're a security engineer, still do your job as a security engineer, but also think and act like a CISO? And you might be like, but Eric, how do I do that? Simple example. What do security engineers typically do? They go in and they're told what to do. And they do technical things. So you're often brought into a meeting. Your boss says, show up to this meeting and say whether this is secure or not. You go to the meeting and you say, there's these vulnerabilities, these vulnerabilities, these vulnerabilities. It doesn't fit within our risk posture. Therefore, I don't think we're secure, and I don't think we should do that. That's the role of a security engineer. Now, if you are acting, behaving, and acting like a CISO, here's the difference. You now start going around to some of the different VPs and start looking at what projects they're working on what's happening, and you go to your boss and say, hey, I know these three areas are working on these new projects, and I just wanted to know if you want me to start putting together some initial risk analysis and focus. So now you're doing some strategic planning. Your boss might say, oh, no, that's fine. You don't need to do that. Most CISOs, most bosses are overworked and have too much to do, so they're going to love it. They're going to love that you're helping them out. Now, you're not going up to them saying, I'm a CISO and I want to get rid of you, right? No, you're not saying the words, but you're acting and behaving in that role, helping and supporting them. Then when you go to the actual meetings, now instead of pointing out the risks, you actually put together a project plan with a solution. You say, hey, I know you don't like hearing about all these risks, so let me give you the options. Here's option 1, option 2, and option 3, and here's some associated costs on how you can actually get this to a point where this will be within our risk posture and can get approved, and we can roll this out very, very quickly. Notice the difference. You're still in that role, but you're acting and behaving differently. You're adding to it. You're not sitting there going, I'm not going to be a security engineer, blah, 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 and you're pushing back going, that's too much. No, do the job and then do more. There's no reason why you can't be that security engineer, but then the way you're acting, showing up, delivering, and behaving is aligned with strategy, solutions, and how a CISO thinks and acts. And then in your mind, you walk around going, I'm thinking and acting and behaving like a CISO. I am a CISO. I might not have the title yet, right? I might not be there, but I am thinking and acting like a CISO, because as soon as you own that, everything follows. People get it backwards. People think the external results come first, and then the internal results happen. So like once somebody anoints me as a CISO in the title, then I will show up and act like a CISO. The problem is it's backwards, because the probability of you getting a job as a CISO when you're not acting and behaving like a CISO is going to be pretty darn slim. So forget about titles. A title is just something on a business card. A title is just something that you put on an email header or footer. A title doesn't define who you are and how you show up. So start thinking and acting like a CISO, because the reality is CISOs think differently. One of my favorite stories to help illustrate this is there was a famous US golfer, and one of the princes in the Middle East said, I want to fly you over on my private jet and spend a week with me playing golf in the Middle East. I just admire your skills as a professional golfer, and I am doing very well as a prince. And I would love to have you come over, play some golf, spend some time together, and get to know each other. So the golfer said, sure. So they flew the golfer over on his private jet, put him up in the finest accommodations, the finest restaurants, and everything you can imagine. They had an amazing week. And the golfer is about to leave. And the prince looks at him and says, "Thank you for coming over. I want to get you a gift for coming over and spending a week with me." And the golfer looks at him and goes, "You flew me over on your private jet. You put me up in the accommodations. You paid for everything. You don't need to give me any gift." But if you know the culture over there, that's how they operate. They're very giving people. So he goes, "No, I insist." The prince says, "I insist to give you a gift." So the golfer's thinking, okay, what's something that's not too big or too much, but could be a nice gesture? And he collects golf clubs. He has all these different golf clubs, from old putters to old wedges to drivers. So he looks at the prince and says, "You can get me a golf club. I collect golf clubs. I always love new golf clubs. It'd be great to have a golf club in my collection from you." So the prince says, "Done." So the golfer gets back on the plane, flying back to the US, and he can't help but think, what type of golf club would a prince give me? And he's wondering, is it going to have a shaft made of gold? Are there going to be diamonds in the handle of the driver? And he's just sort of imagining for a little bit of what this could look like. And then he gets back home, and a week passes, and a month passes, and it's going on 2 months, and he's starting to wonder, maybe I'm not getting a gift. I would have thought the gift would have arrived already. And then a little over 2 months later, he gets a thick FedEx box in a square like 8 by 11 from the Middle East. And he's sort of holding it in his hand, and he's a little surprised because it's too small to be a golf club. And he's like, "This can't be a golf club. I wonder, did he just get me a book or something else?" And he opens it up, and he starts reading through. It's all this contracts and legal paperwork. And what he quickly realizes, it is the deed to a 36-hole golf club in Phoenix, Arizona. And he just sits there holding the deed, starts laughing, because when he said golf club, he thought a physical club, like a putter or a driver. When the prince or the king thought differently, he heard golf club, and he thought a golf course, right? So royalty thinks differently. Princes think differently. Kings think differently, right? They have a different mindset of how they view the world. And the analogy I like to give is that golfer is the security engineer. He's thinking and acting a certain way. That prince or royalty is the CISO. They think and act differently. When a security engineer hears a term like, "Can you assess the risk?" they're hearing, "Find the vulnerabilities and tell them what's wrong." When a CISO hears figure out the risk or analyze the risk, they're thinking, "Give me a solution. Give me options and a solution with how to reduce that risk to an acceptable level, with percent breakdowns, costs, and details on how to implement it." CISOs think differently than security engineers. And this is why so many folks have difficulty getting hired as a CISO. They completely skip step one. And that's why I've spent probably close to half of this podcast on that, because it is the most critical one. If you get step one, step two and step three become easy, because you're now thinking and acting from the position of a CISO, which is where you need to show up in writing CVs and in interviews. So you need to go in and every day look at yourself and say, "I am a CISO." And then ask yourself the question, how would a CISO operate? How would a CISO function? And then everything you're doing is driven, does this help me become more CISO-like? Does this help me become more focused like a CISO? So now your day is focused on thinking, acting, behaving, and showing up like a CISO. Like I said, you could be working in a SOC. You could be working as a security engineer. Heck, you could be working at a restaurant. But that doesn't mean that is who you are. That is what you're currently doing. I need to convince you that job titles and your current job is not a reflection of who you are. If you truly believe your career and your reason for being here is to be a world-class CISO, and you're going to change the world by being a world-class CISO, you're going to continue to elevate, and you're going to work for the top organizations defining and creating security strategies that change and transform how companies do cybersecurity. That is your purpose. That is within you. That is who you are. The job is temporary. The job is just a current step getting you towards that end state. So everything you do, think, breathe, and act should all be about not my current job or your current limitations or your current title. Deep down inside, even if you're flipping burgers in a diner, you know you're a CISO. You know your CISO material, and that's what you're thinking about as soon as you're waking up in the morning. That's what you're thinking about all day long. You're always looking for opportunities to help build out strategies, and you're always thinking and behaving in that manner. If I can get that through to you, where you tap into your true identity and disconnect it from your current job, disconnect it from your current title, and you start thinking, acting, and behaving like I am a CISO, that's when everything shifts and changes. So now that we got step one, you act, believe, and know without a shadow of a doubt that you are a CISO. And I'm recommending saying it all throughout the day. I am a CISO. I'm a world-class CISO. I build out strategies that help organizations implement more effective security to grow and expand their business. I come up with a small mission statement or vision phrase, but remember, make sure it's aligned with the CISO strategy and growing the business. Those are really the key things. You're a chief executive, focus on information security, to strategically build, grow, and expand the business, helping increase revenue and profitability. Like, those words need to be in there. Use that phrase, tailor it, but it needs to be all about thinking, acting, and behaving. Of course, this is Life of a CISO, so I'm focusing on a CISO, but I know some of you listen in different careers. You can put in any career you want. Whoever it is you want to be, you need to start becoming and owning that person, regardless of your current job and regardless of the current title. So now, you're thinking, acting, behaving like a CISO. Now that you know who you are, now that you remember why you're here, now that you remember what it is you're doing, now I want you to go in and write your CV. Oh, but Eric, I already have a CV. Have a bonfire, take it out back, and burn it. Here's the reality. The way I used to do this is I would have you go in and take your current CV and mark it up, evaluate it, remove anything technical, and look at it from the eyes of a CISO instead of the eyes of a security engineer. That's okay, but here's what I found. If that current CV was written by a security engineer and it was put together by a security engineer, it's screaming security engineer. And this is the reason why most CISOs don't get interviews, because it's screaming the wrong message. So yes, you can go in and clean it up, but if it's written from a security engineer standpoint and you clean up some things, that security engineer stuff is still going to be there. So what I find is even better is start from scratch. From a mindset of, I am a CISO. I might not be in the position of a CISO, but here's the cool part. If you've been in any job for 5 years or even 3 or 4 years, I can almost bet that you've done CISO-like things. Now, it might have only been 5% of the job, but you still did it. In your current career, in your current job, have you ever put together a strategy? Yes, Eric, once. Great. That's what we focus on. Have you ever talked to executives? Yes, that's what you focus on. Have you ever helped a business unit increase revenue by working on a project in which you helped implement security that rolled out a new project technology that increased revenue in any way, shape, or form? Get creative here, my friends. My probability is it's probably yes. But Eric, I only did it once. Who cares? Here's the trick. When you're thinking and acting like a CISO, and you're writing your CV from the position of a CISO, typically for most people that have been security engineers, you're focusing on the 3 to 5% of what you've done, not the 92 to 95%. Because most of us are like, well, Eric, day to day, I don't do that. I don't care. If you've done it once, you've done it. You're not lying. If you've done it a single time, if you've ever talked to an executive, then you can honestly say on your CV, I've briefed executives on security strategy. You're not saying 100 times. You're not saying it's what your job is, but you've done it. That's what we're looking for. So it's this mind shift of stop looking at your day-to-day, because your day-to-day is more old school of who you were. Security engineer is not who you currently are. And focus on that niche 3 to 5%. That over the course you've done those little glimpses. And if for some reason you tell me you've never done any of it, which I don't believe, then guess what? Put on hold looking for a CISO for 6 months. And now for the next 6 months, you're doing your job, but your sole focus is how do I get CISO experience? How can I talk to an executive? How can I build out a strategy? How can I help business units? Some of it you can't directly control, like you can't force an executive to sit with you, but you can't set up a meeting with a director or a VP and talk about helping them increase revenue on their projects. I'm sure in your company you can find somebody. Most of the others is, why can't on your free time you write a strategic plan? Why can't on your free time you find a project that's really big, that's going to be a huge, huge revenue stream for the company, and independently work on a security plan for rolling it out? So there's a lot of stuff you can do independently. But Eric, nobody's asking me to do it. Who cares? You're not interfering with your current job. You're not hurting the business. You're helping the business. Worst case scenario is you write it and they don't use it. But guess what? Now on your CV, you could say, I wrote a strategic plan. You're not saying whether it was used or not, right? You honestly did it. So there's a lot of things you can do independently that can get you that skill set you need for that CV. And more importantly, most people want to help you more than you realize. I know I go to folks who go, reach out to execs or VPs and see if they'll meet with you. Tell them you want to help them implement more effective security. You want to understand the business a little better so you can better do your job. And most people are like, oh, they're too busy, not going to help me. The reality is they'll help you more than you realize. Most people want to be helpful. Most people want to assist you. Most people are willing to help because guess what? People help them. The biggest issue I find is most people are so afraid of no, they never ask. Now let me ask you a question. If you sit there for 3 months and you're like, no executive will meet with me, no executive will meet with me, no executive will meet with me, and you never ask, what's going to be the outcome? Guarantee, guarantee, my friends, you'll have no one to help you. But what if once a week? Let's get crazy, twice a week. You reach out to different executives and you say, hey, I know you're super busy, but I want to better understand the business and learn how I can better do my job. I was wondering if there's any way I could buy you coffee or lunch or we could meet for 30 minutes. And you keep asking them and you keep asking them. What is the probability that one of them will say yes? Greater than 0. Now, there is a chance after a couple months you get 30 no's. What does that mean? You need 50. What I always tell folks is if you want to get business experience and meet with executives and understand how the business works, your goal is not to set up a meeting. I want you to come back to me in a month with 100 no's. 100 legitimate no's, where you actually reach out and they don't say, hey, I'd love to, I'm busy, reach out to me next week. That's not a no. You better reach out to them next week. And eventually, if you keep reaching out, they will say yes. So that's not a no. I want you to come back to me in a month with a stack of paper of 100 authentic no's, where they actually said, no, I will not meet with you. No, I will not help you. Because here's the reality. Most of us get discouraged way too quickly. Most of us think we should get a yes, and if we don't get a yes, we give up. I can't tell you how many folks I've coached or worked with that I go in and I start doing this with them, and they're like, Eric, I talk to the executives and none of them will meet with me. I always love that. None of them. None of them. So how many executives are in your company? Probably 100. Maybe 50 if you're a smaller company. And you're telling me every single one of them said no. Every single one of them slammed the door in your face. They're like, well, not exactly. I'm like, how many did you talk to? That's not valid stats, my friends. That's not going to get the job done. I want you to come back with 100. When you have 100 no's, then we'll talk. Then I'll figure out a new strategy. Then we'll figure out a new way to do it. But here's the issue. Nobody, I have never, ever, ever, ever had a single person I work with that come back to me with 100 no's. Why? They always get a yes before. They're always getting a yes before that no happens. So reset your bar. Your goal is not one rejection and you give up. It's you keep asking till you get there. And like I said, most people want to help. Most people want to assist. If you want something bad enough, then you don't give up. What I always say is, unless they file a restraining order on you, you keep going. So unless an executive comes back to you and says, Eric, you have to stop. I am not going to meet with you. I will never meet with you. And if you continue this, it's going to negatively impact your job. I understand your perseverance. I understand why you want to meet, but I'm not going to meet with you. You must stop or I'm going to report you to HR. Then you stop. And this, by the way, I'm focusing on CISO, but this works in any area of your life. If you want something bad enough, you better be willing to fight for it. You better be willing to get as many no's as you can. And it works. I can give you a list of my private coaching clients that when they're looking for a job, I actually make the bar higher. When they're looking for a job, I tell them, I want 500 rejections. That's our target. I want you to go out there and as quick and as fast as possible, I want 500 rejections. I want you to apply to 500 jobs over the course of the next, you go as quick as you want. It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. But I want you to apply to 500 jobs and get rejected by all of them. I want the data so then we can assess where the issue is. Because if you apply to 500 jobs, go to different variations, some you get no interviews, some you get some interviews, and you get no's by every single one of them, that's amazing data. If you give me that data, I can fix any problem. Data drives decisions, not emotions. If you can figure out the data, you can solve anything. But you know what happens every single time? They never get to 500. They always get a job. I just had another one. We were going on 4 months. Took a little while to convince him. I think he applied at the end of the day to like 180, and now he has the dream job that he loves. He's a CISO. Well, he always was a CISO. Now he has the title and the salary to prove and back it up. So we have to shift our mindsets, my friend, on no's aren't bad, no's are learning. So you need to go in and figure out what is the experience I need to put on my CV, and then you work and harvest as hard as you can. Is there any possible creative way, honest, don't lie, but is there any creative way I currently have that experience? And if I do, put it on your CV. If I don't, what do I need to do over the next 3 to 6 months to get that experience? And now what you're doing is you're tailoring the CV based on what skills a CISO would need. So now when somebody reads that CV, it screams, I am a CISO. This is actually going to turn into a 2-part series because I only got to the second step. Remember our 4 steps. Mindset, mindset, mindset. I spent a lot of time on that because that's critical. Now we're in the middle of writing your CV because that's the key. The sole purpose of your CV is one thing, to get an interview. So if you're not getting interviews, your CV is not where it needs to be. So I spent some time on making sure you know what skills you need in the CV, find the skills or get the skills, and then in the next episode, we'll continue part 2, where we continue looking at building out a world-class CV, interviewing, and doing the follow-up process. You are a world-class CISO. That's the goal for the next week. I want you to become obsessed with thinking and acting. I am a world-class CISO. I am here to help companies build strategic plans that implement effective security that help grow their revenue and profitability across the entire business. That needs to become your obsession of how you think, act, and behave. And guess what? Once you know and show up as a world-class CISO, the results will quickly follow.